for what is, I believe, which is one of my passions around service learning. And what is it? So I'm going to take you through a visual journey tonight. This is not going to be me just speaking, where you're going to actually see things in action. And what is it? And how I'm looking to make it part of the fabric of Beth Israel as we move forward. So truly, service learning is something that has become a passion of mine. I have pretty extensive experience in doing the work of what we're going to see tonight of service learning and share a lot with you. And I want to answer questions and thoughts that you may have along the way. So I'm sure Eileen will keep tabs on the chat if you have questions, but I also am going to stop periodically for questions. So don't feel like you need to hold on to it forever. I will stop and give you that space. So, you know what, Eileen, oh, okay. So since we're doing portions, okay, let me see how to do this. Okay, because I'm going to go to PowerPoint for the first one. So I'll still do the share, but I'm going to do it this way. I got it. Okay. Hold on one second. Just give me a moment to resettle. And then we had to do, because we had to maximize some of our pieces here. So what we're learning tonight and what I'm introducing you to is the power of what we call service learning. And if you see, this is from one of my many trips to Latin America. This is actually Nicaragua, and I'm the second one from the right. And this is with some of our students and adults that were part of this experience, going with us and doing house building brigades. So what exactly is service learning? Can someone just unmute and read what service learning is?
Service learning is an educational approach that combines learning objectives with community service in order to provide a pragmatic, progressive learning experience while meeting societal needs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Robert. So the first thing to know is that service learning is about education. But it's not just education where you're learning what we call Torah Lishma, learning for the sake of learning. There's actually learning objectives that are built in, and you're taking the ideas and components of community service, and you're providing it through an educational approach that also benefits society. So what you're doing is in the synagogue faith-based realm, we're taking our Jewish tradition, we're learning, and we're implementing it in real time and how it benefits community and the greater society. So what I'm going to introduce you to today is through an NGO, and those who may not be familiar, an NGO is a non-governmental organization. And I have had the pleasure and privilege of working with an NGO that was based both in New York and Latin America called Bridges to Community. And they were actually started by individuals who went down in 1992 after a major earthquake in Latin America to help with medical brigades and to start supporting the communities. And they gathered they had business owners, and they gathered local people. It was an owner of a local hardware store in Westchester County in New York. And they gathered some medical professionals that they had in the community to bring them down to Puerto Rico, to Dominican. I've been to many places, to Nicaragua, and to start working in the rural communities in the province of Masaya, which is right outside of the capital, Managua. And basically the homes were completely devastated. It was very unfortunate. So one of the things that the NGO wanted to do, it wasn't an NGO yet, it was a group of people, wanted to really support the community and try to do what they could to really to enable people not to lessen disease and bring awareness to how they can support themselves. So but then a number of years later, after they did the initial brigades, and they formed the NGO, there started to be a housing crisis because one of the major hurricanes came in the mid-90s into Nicaragua and devastated the community once more. And so, prone to earthquakes and to storms, this Bridges to Community wanted to figure out a way to support. And one of the things they did was housing. And so, can somebody read that piece, housing?
A home built by Bridges to Community is much more than four walls and a roof. It's the difference between safety and vulnerability, health and illness, dignity and despair. It is the foundation on which everything else is built.
Now, I know intellectually, I'm sure you can understand that, but I'm going to show you visually how it really is the difference between health and illness, and how one can learn about how to have dignity and not be in the depths of despair around housing. And then can you read the piece of education?
Sure. Education is an essential ingredient of any plan to overcome systemic poverty. We are committed to seeing young people grow towards their potential rather than fall victim to the epidemics of child labor and teen pregnancy that plague the rural regions. Is that of the Dominican Republic?
Yes, Dominican
Nicaragua.
Republic and Nicaragua. So those are the two areas that Bridges to Community had operated in. Bridges to Community has ceased actually right now, has put a pause on all volunteer brigades for obvious reasons and through the pandemic, and as well has ceased operations in Nicaragua, not their community initiatives and scholarship programs, but their house building brigades because of the internal political strife that was going on. And so they moved a lot of their teams over to the Dominican Republic and built up their program there. So there are other pieces to this, but I'm going to hold on that. And I'm going to start to show you a little visual, and then I'm going to stop for some questions and continue. So here we go. So first, I'm taking you really on a journey. So I'm trying to show you, I typically take students I'm taking high school students, 9th to 12th graders, and adults. So typically, the way it started with me and coming into this experience was one day, one of my congregants who happened to be very active in social action decided to go on a brigade with the local church that we had a partnership with, like we do with First United Methodist. And we run interfaith programs with them and things like that, but never did anything outside of local work with them. And he came back transformed, and he said, we have to join them on the next trip. And this was in 2004. And so I didn't know anything about this work, and I had heard about people volunteering. I knew about Peace Corps, I knew about other things, but I was like, what is this? How are we doing this for a week? I don't understand. We're bringing students to a third world country. Like, what are we doing? And I needed to understand it more. So we sent our youth director, the first one, who got impassioned about it and came back and said, you have to do this. You got to really see this. And so I went down on my first one, and it was phenomenal. And I was transformed. And I said, this has to be part of how we do our Judaism. And I became inspired. And for the next 17 years, we kept it going with the entire 16 years of 17, 18 trips. We kept it going with an interfaith annual or sometimes semi-annual work trip. And this is how we started. So we would come down. There's no sound in this. We would come down. And this, you're seeing our descent into Managua. And as you see, it's a very rural agricultural area. You see those, the smoke in the background, that's garbage being burnt because the way the garbage systems are, it didn't go that fast. That's just a video. But the community is very poor. And unlike unlike countries like Costa Rica, who decided that ecotourism was the way they were going to go, Nicaragua was about 2 decades behind any kind of advancements. So this is a sampling of some of the students that we have. You see those 9th to 12th graders. You see some adults we have over here in the experience as well, right here. Some of them are parents. Some of them are chaperones. Some of them are staff. And all of them have a passion to do this. And so one of the things that we were trying to do was, how do you understand what the concept of neighbor is? When in our tradition, last week we learned in our Torah, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself. How does that translate for you? And so some of the things that we would do is to look at how we live that and actualize that. So upon entry into the community, besides orientations and everything else, we enter into these rural communities. Because I used to bring anywhere from 28 or 29 to 45 or 50 just from the synagogue every year, plus at least 1 ton of donations with us. So a person would have 1 bag that's theirs, another bag up to 50 pounds of donated materials to the communities that we were going to live in and work in for the week. And we would start to engage. And so one of the things we do when we get there is to engage in an opening ceremony to meet the members of the community. What are we doing in those communities? Well, let me take you here. This is a typical home for someone who might be a potential beneficiary of a new home, a new house. What do you see this? What is this home made of? Anybody share? You can unmute and share.
Tin. It's made of tin.
Tin and scraps, right? The scrap metal, right? We have tin roofs. We have wood on the side, right? We see wood holding up the roofing, and we see slits in the roofing also, right? And what do we not see on the floor?
Floor.
We don't see floor. Right? We don't see a foundation, right?
Yeah.
It kind of looks more like a sukkah than it does an actual home, right? So this is what people use and piecemeal to put together their homes. The other thing, it can't really get a good vantage point from this angle, but one of the things that we also don't see is a door that locks and closes. How does that even matter, really? Because, what does it matter? Well, when you don't have a way to lock whatever small material possessions you have, someone always has to be home. You can't leave your home. Someone has to be home in your family so the family can't even go all together anywhere at any time because they can't leave their home out of fear that something would go missing or get stolen. Now, the communities that we're in are pretty safe, but it doesn't mean they're safe because we come in as community volunteers to support them, and they understand that, and they're very loving to us. In all my trips, we've never had an issue of things getting missing, or getting stolen, anything like that. And we also have security people who are with us that are working 4 bridges from the community. So this home probably is no more than, I would say, 90 square feet, maybe 100, this one that you're looking at. How many people would you say live in that home?
8.
6.
Could be 6, it could be 8. Rarely would it be 10, but it could be 6 or 8, right? And usually it's multi-generational. So you can have a grandparent, usually one who's already deceased, so you can have a grandmother, grandfather. You can have the parents that are usually very young and multiple children of varying ages. And they're all living in that space. Everybody mostly lives outside because that's how they live. There is no space to be. You can't go to your room and close the door and have. In the homes we build, they create rooms and spaces and dividers, and so people do have some space. But this is what, when we enter into the community, we're looking at homes like this all over. So you imagine coming from our beautiful San Diego, pretty affluent communities that we live in, even though we may intersect with lots of different people of different ages and stages and socioeconomic backgrounds, this is typically not what we're seeing around. What we're doing is taking our community and bringing them to an area and location to show and demonstrate how 80% of the world actually lives below the poverty line. And this is extreme poverty. Yes, we see it in West Virginia too. We see it in Appalachia. We have places in our country itself that does this. There's something different when you go and travel outside the United States and see this in many areas and locales. And so this is what the foundation of what we're looking at and understanding. So the Bridges to Community doesn't just go in and build a home. They go into a community and they spend a year or two working with the community and assessing the needs, building a council of local leaders, and starting to assess who the beneficiaries of different homes are. And it's not just homes. It becomes and manifests into other things, which I'll share a little later. But I just wanted to get your understanding a little bit about what we're seeing. So now we're ready for day one. Take a listen.
So right now we are in San Joaquin building a house, and it's the first day.
Right now we're getting ready to start building the foundation. We have to dig holes in each of the corners, and then eventually we'll be able to actually connect it, and that's when we start actually building the house. But right now we're just building the house.
Beautiful. So the home, these are two, I think they were ninth graders at the time. They're probably, I think this is 2017. So this is probably, they're 4 years older now, maybe freshmen in college now. And this is an example of the land that we are in. Now the land could be more arid, the land could be more lush, depending on the area. The family has to have a deed to the land. The land cannot be just potentially someone else's. It has to have a deed. They have to have a deed to the land so that it can't be that someone else would claim the property or to claim the home down the road. I think they learned that early on when they probably made some mistakes and realized that could happen. But they work with legal aid and they work with others to support the communities. And we start working on foundation. So from day one, we're working. And a typical work hour is somewhere getting up at 7 a.m. in the morning and getting ready and eating breakfast and going. And I'm going to show you how that all works. And then working for a few hours, eating lunch, taking a siesta a little bit, or playing with the local children in the community, which there are plentiful always. And they're overjoyed to be with our teens and adults. And then working a few hours in the afternoon, coming back, having dinner and doing some reflection and community activities. This is a typical home, if you see. And if you notice, you're going to see the gentlemen on the top are the albañiles. They're hired and contracted by Bridges to Community, and they're the masons. And we work alongside them. And those below, the little children are not ours. They belong to the community. And then with the teens and the adults are the ones that are working to construct the home. What's the difference in the makeup of this home that you see that looks very different from the one you saw before?
Looks like it's going to have 4 walls and be solid and
Yes.
no holes.
No holes. You're going to see a full complete house in a little bit, and it's going to have flooring, and it's a foundation, right? We were building the foundation I showed you. It's going to have windows and 2 access points. So it'll have 2 doors and usually 2 to 3 windows, depending on the design that the family gets to choose. So a family does get to choose be a beneficiary. because of the condition of their former home. And then they get to, but it's not a handout at all. They actually have to pay a mortgage on the house. And it's a very small mortgage, the equivalent of like $10 a month. But that money goes right back into a community pot that sparks the ability to engage in microloans for community members to build their own businesses or to support cooperatives and such. So it reinvests that money back into the community. The homes that are built, that comes from trip fees and some other donations and other sources. So it costs about $4,000 to $6,000 to build each home. And they're basically one room, but they're one large room that can be subdivided if needed. But they are, if you notice, there's rebar, there are blocks, there's cement. So these are earthquake resistant, not earthquake proof, but earthquake resistant. And so far, Bridges has never lost a home in all the homes that they've built, and they've built well over 1,500 homes in Nicaragua alone, plus the ones they're building in the DR right now. Shelley, you had a question.
Oh, that was the question. Coming from the Bay Area, you don't use brick because it would collapse. So the rebar holds it?
The rebar reinforces foundation. So the rebar is laid at the foundation level. It's laid at each of the cornerstones, and it's laid in the middle pour. We call it the middle pour inside, and at the top pour. So, and when we start to see the A-frame that will be built, it's laid on top of the A-frame. So there is rebar throughout the entire house.
Okay.
And that is really important for construction.
Yes.
Yes.
Where did you get all the raw materials to build this?
Great question. So the materials are ordered. We have the NGO that we work with has a head mason in each community, and the head mason is in charge of working with what we call the IVCs, the International Volunteer Coordinators, and Bridges has their own construction manager who works to secure all of the materials. But the materials are paid for, again, by trip fee. Like when you pay your trip fee, part of the funding from the trip fee goes towards the funding for the house. So that's part of it. We don't only build houses. We've built schools and classrooms and other projects, latrines, and I'll show you more of that as we go along. Yes, please.
Are you bringing the stone from the US, or do they?
No, they build it locally. Not locally in that area, but locally in the region. They built it. So all the material is built in the region, without question. So let me show you this. What are you guys doing?
Filling the volcano. I also got a picture of like making.
What's the volcano used for?
Mixing cement.
So what they were mixing was cement. There are no cement trucks. There are no cement trucks that come and mix the cement like we see here and drop it in your driveway or drop it or put it where it needs to go. Cement is mixing all day, every day, different levels of cement, depending on what we're working on that morning or that afternoon. So the volcano is a common way of doing it. And I can tell you, 17 years later, I'm pretty good at making cement. So it's something I learned experience over time, but it's fun and really, you need people power to do it. And none of these students or adults, with rare exception, are home builders, right? All of them are students who are studying for their APs, have their 3 or 4 sports that they are involved in. Our adult volunteers are doctors and lawyers and business people and philanthropists and all run the gamut of and ages and stages. We've had senior citizens come with us that have been part of the brigades. We've had young college students join our brigades. And so I can't say there's one, that you see, obviously you're looking at younger students. That's because that has been the bulk of our community, but we've had people without students, adults come and have been part of this experience over and over again. not just one time. We've had someone from the local church that I was with. There was a gentleman, he was in his 70s. He came 5 times with us down to Latin America, to the Dominican Republic, and 3 other times to Nicaragua. So, and he had no children. His children were well grown in their 30s. He had no children at home. He was a grandfather. He loved to come. He loved to be around the teens. We loved him. He was like a grandpa for the group. And he was a hard worker. This is a sampling of the house as it begins to get constructed, finish the construction. You see the wood is on the top pour. And all of this is really intense work, So in Nicaragua, in dry season, you're probably 90, 95 degrees, dry heat usually every day. But it's, and it gets cool at night. So it's not the 4 seasons in one day like San Diego, but it definitely is workable. And it's hot, incredible work, but really rewarding work. And remember, mostly the community, you'll find the beneficiaries whose house that is, if they can figure out a way, somebody in the community, somebody in their family, or maybe several of them are working with us, alongside us, to build their own home. So they're not watching and waiting for the house to be built. They're in there in the trenches working. We once had a mom, she was maybe 7, 8 months pregnant. She was working with us all week. We didn't have her doing any heavy anything, but she was working with us. She was on the site. She was bringing us water. She was bending steel and rebar. She was phenomenal. This is a sampling. When we go back to different communities, we get to visit the communities that we built some of the homes for. So the year before, I was part of the group that built that home, this young woman's home. I got to visit her a year later. What do you notice about this home? Anything?
A door.
Beautiful
You notice doors.
Window?
Yes, there are doors.
Gorgeous
Yes.
door.
Windows. Yes. So that is part of the building. So we don't actually deal with the construction of the doors. Once we're finished with the home, then the carpenter comes in and measures the door and fits the doors and the windows to the community. What can you do with a door? You can lock it. We even had enough leftover cement to create flooring outside so she could make a little patio. So she wanted that, and we created that for her as well. And so she has a place to be outside the sun, but outside, and more space for her family to be. And we've done that many times, been back and seen the community. This is a little bit of of some of the communities that we visited, and you see there's a piñata in the middle. This is the fiesta that we have to welcome us into the community. Some of our students, this is a little bit of just their, I think I see them, they're in shorts. We don't work in shorts, we only work in pants. So this is post a work day, and they're probably just hanging out and taking photos. We were bringing this kid somewhere. This are the trucks that we use to get from where we sleep to the work site every day, depending on where. Sometimes we don't even need it. Sometimes the work sites in the Dominican Republic, we were right near the work sites. So we were sleeping and eating within walking distance. So it was easy to do. But we do come with these trucks, and we get on these trucks and go. So I actually have driven one of those trucks several times, because one of them was stick shift, and there was a newer staff member, Bridges, and she wasn't fully trained in the stick. So before I even got there, they're like, "Can you drive one of our sticks? We need to put you on the insurance. Can you drive one of the sticks while we're there?" And of course, so I learned to drive on the standard. So our kids, my son who will start driving next year, he has no even clue what a standard car is. So that's fun. So this is in the city of Granada, which is the public capital of the world, actually, in Nicaragua. And after we do some touring at the beginning of the trip and the end of the trip, and we get to go to some restaurants and see some of the sites and touring. This is a sampling. Building isn't the only piece. It's a cross-cultural experience. In Hebrew, we call it a mifgash, an exchange. In Spanish, we call it intercambio, which is like an interchange. And so this is one of the ways in which we engage the community. The community doesn't see us as other. They see us as part of the communal family for the week. And they're a little trepidatious, but they get comfortable. And once a day or two passes, everybody is connecting with each other. Many of our students don't have any Spanish language. They're not even taking it in school. A lot of communication happens through body language and that kind of dialogue. And it's really wonderful, really, truly wonderful. They're working here because you can see their pants, right? So they're getting ready. Either they're coming back or no, they're clean. So they're getting ready for a work day in the morning. Some of the food is really an important aspect of the trip because some of our students are very picky eaters, but we tell them and prepare them that when they are in the community, we eat local food. So a lot of the food, we have cocineras that are trained by Bridges to Community, trained by the NGO to work and eat local food. So all the food is local sourced, probably grown within several miles of where we're eating or sleeping. And they're cooking for us morning, noon, and night. They're there from 4:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. And they're cooking 3 meals. They cook for the Masons. They cook for some of the community members when we have reflections and exchanges with the beneficiaries of the houses. They do that work. It's incredible. The food is unbelievable. So if you like Spanish food, and it's not Mexican. So like it is here. It's different, but it's quite delicious. This is a sampling. I wouldn't say this is the best view, but this is one of the examples of like one of the quarters where we would live. Actually, the beds are much nicer now than they were. This was in Nicaragua several years ago. It's not like that anymore. But basically, we live in cots and bunk beds and mosquito netting, and this is how people bring a duffel bag, huge duffel bag with their stuff for the week or whatever rolling suitcase they have, and this is where we settle for the week. So we usually divide into 2 or 3 of these, and this is our dormitory. So you see, this is a mother and a son. He's actually off to college next year, and she has come with him 3 times. They've both been with the group 3 times, and they are laying the foundation for a house in Nicaragua. We have to move all those bricks from the outside drop-off into the house. Each house usually has between 800 and 1,000 bricks. The houses in the Dominican Republic have about 12 to 1,400. They're a little bit bigger. I'll show you a little more.
Hey, Rabbi, one quick second. Michael has his hand up. Did you want, Michael, did you want to drop that question in the chat?
Sure, I'll put it in the chat.
Great,
Okay.
thanks. I just didn't want you to
answer.
forget it.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Eileen.
Two.
For IVC, Zoe.
Hello.
Again, another mixing cement opportunity. Always a good one. The question was, so we worked actually in a town called La Guama, which is toward the Haitian border. They actually worked in 2, but the one we worked in for the past couple of years was in La Guama, which is in the San Juan de la Manguana region, which is within an hour and a half of the border. So we worked there. So I see you worked in the Manazillo region, Montecristi area. That's on the north coast. It's a little further north. We were more central west of San Juan de la Manguana. So as we go along, sometimes there's traffic jams that happens on occasion. So we have to, compete with our daily traffic there. And a little bit more of what's going on here.
Drew, what are you doing right now?
Pouring some cement.
What? Just like every other day.
Because of OSHA laws in the United States, students don't always get to do a lot of hands-on work until they're at least 16 years of age. In the Dominican Republic and Nicaragua, they don't have those rules. So our students from 14 years old are working, or they rotate jobs. I can tell you that perhaps in the earlier years, there were some that went on the trips that were not really in it for the right reasons. As the trip grew and expanded, we started to be selective about students who go and to really explain why they're going and the missions. And for many years, the students who are going are self-selected. They're giving up ski week, they're giving up vacations with their families, see friends. Their adults are prioritizing this. It costs money to go. It's not, and so there's a lot of purpose behind it. So all of these students really are working hard to be there. And I'm going to skip that one and to share. Oh, I'll show you this one. This is dry season. This is the effects of climate change. I see from this one is 2018. So this is 3 years ago. And you can imagine, so I have been there since 2004, right? And it has never rained in the winter season that I go. This is the first time. This is the effects of climate change, just so you can see. One of our participants, she's painting rust paint on rebar. Students playing with other children. They play games. We bring games. We never leave anything. We give it to the community. We give it to the leaders in the community, and they either have very inexpensive types of, they do like a flea market for the community, or they parse the donations out. But everything benefits the community and nothing is given privately. So that's just really important, just to say that. I think, Emily, you asked about Casas de Luz. I don't know about it. I've heard of it. I don't know them, but I'll talk about Noah Eden. Okay, that's good. That's great. I know we're going to start hyper local for sure, and then we'll expand that. But I'll talk to you more about that. That's great to know. I'm going to go again. We're doing some sightseeing, some touring, because we want students to have cultural experiences and insights as well. Again, community engagements and different experiences where our students learn to connect with the others. I'm showing you a lot of teens, but there are adults that are with us. So I'm going to show you a little bit how this translates Jewishly and how this translates in the experience. So take a listen. Greetings from Nicaragua. We're in the Nindari region, working on our annual service learning trip with us, our synagogue, and the Bedford Presbyterian Church, working together in partnership and fellowship, learning what it means to truly love your neighbor. And thinking about that specific commandment from Leviticus, where we say, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. It's part of our holiness code, trying to figure out how we do that. So I went to our teens to ask them, as they were building and as they're working today for that home behind us that will belong to a grandmother, a mother, and 3 children next week, I asked them to think about how you love your neighbor. And here's what they had to say.
If your neighbor is in a situation where you have the ability to help them, and they're in a situation that could be classified as lower than yours, per se, loving your neighbors, helping them if they're in that situation, treating them with respect. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
To help them out when they're down, especially in the case of Nicaragua, we kind of meddled with Nicaragua, the U.S., and I feel like it's our responsibility or our obligation to help them back up, get them running again.
We're doing this work, and we're really showing their support, and they're being welcoming and loving us back. Ooh, can I add to mine? Because Maddie gave me an idea. I think also to love your neighbors, to definitely be with them through the good and the bad. Like Maddie was saying, we're supporting them through the bad, but also we're here to celebrate them, when the house is completed. We're here to have fun with them, to connect with them. So yeah.
What does it mean to love your neighbor?
It means to help them out when they're in need. It also means just to be with them, just to celebrate life with them, and be together, be a family, not just neighbors.
Okay, to love your neighbors for me means like loving yourself. I really think that what you give is to other people is what you get back. For me, we're part of a master plan, a unique plan, and whatever you do for other people is what you get, because we are part of this, big universe, and we are all are linked together.
So this is just a sampling of the work that we do, is really how you actualize commandedness, right? How do you take what we learn in the text? And we have some on here that love to study every week with us and love to engage in learning, and that is amazing and wonderful. How are you going to live it? That's really important. And I think what we've noticed is now we have great metrics from the outgrowth of these programs and initiatives. And I can tell you that those that have been impacted, if they're adults, they've managed to do many different projects hyperlocally. They've gotten more involved in their communities. If they're teenagers in college, they've created their own brigades in their colleges: Cornell, Vanderbilt, Harvard, UPenn, William and Mary, several others that I know of. Students have gone from our trips and have built other brigades in their communities, their college communities, and shared it with them. They've done exemplary work all around or changed their majors so they can reflect doing international relations, other work to be lawyers, to support, to do pro bono work. It really just expansive learning. So you see, again, some engagements that we have here. The children are unbelievably delicious. And it really is, it's beautiful. And they just want to be played with and enjoyed, and like have companionship. That's really what it's about. So it brings great joy to them and to the community. It's very hard to leave, you can imagine, right? After you're immersed in a community for the week. There's a lot of muscles, and we all see students supporting each other and people supporting one another. That is Dr. Gary Cohn. That was the gentleman who came to me and said, we need to do this work. So he went on the first trip, and we never went without him any other trip. He was grandfathered in, one of our perpetual leaders. And we keep in contact, and he's looking to have the West Coast contingent begin soon with us. So he's very excited. Again, half the house being built, our students working hard to build it up. Here they go. Second piece, right now we're getting towards the top of the house. Rebar, this is the steel bars that hold the roofing up. And this is our completed home. And the completed home is, we do a dedicación. We do a prayer ceremony to dedicate each house officially to each of the beneficiary families. And there's a lot of beautiful things that are shared during those moments. You see the floors. The floors are the difference between health and sickness. Why? Because during the rainy season, which can be very intense, you see there are a lot of animals that are around. Some of these animals carry disease. Some people carry disease. And when water is sitting or running and it's dirty water, it can get into the house and it can bring infection. And so the floors enable a family to have health. As simple as that. Flooring and a roof can enable.
Can I ask about the roof? Is the roof really strong? Does it last how many years?
So the roof is tin aluminum, but they're rust proof, and they can last several decades. So the roofs are really and they're steel framed as well. So they can last, I believe the lifespan on those roofs can be 30 years. So that's greater than some shingle homes in San Diego. So they can last quite a while. Again, just working together, again, you see different colors, you see different ages, You see all different community individuals coming together and working together. And again, this is about building community. This is one of my good friends, Dan, who's been on like 6 trips with me. And then you have just the interchange between the different community members, which is really quite special. This is my last trip. This was 2020. This was a couple of weeks. This was 3 weeks before we shut down. I was in Latin America 3 weeks before the world shut down. And wasn't even thinking about anything, right? Here we are. And there was some concern about going because we had started to hear reports, but there wasn't anything in Latin America. We double, triple checked all of our, everything that we needed to. We had no issues when we were there. Everything was good. But this was a little bit so this was in the Dominican Republic, a very different kind of trip than we've done before. We were building a school. This was the opening ceremony, and we spent the entire week digging the foundation of the school. So I'll show you a little bit. The school, I can't even show you I have to take it in 2 pictures in landscape mode. You see, this is one of our congregants and a parent, and she's digging. And so we went all the way down in the trenches. This took, it was more work than building a home. It was far more work. It was exhausting. I can tell you some of the delicious food that's there. And I can tell you it took those people and more in order to do all this work. And and they put a pause in the building. And I can tell you, because I continue to get updates, and the construction on the school has continued, and it will be completed probably by the end of the summer. So it was supposed to be last summer. It was supposed to be completed, but because of the pandemic, everything got paused. That is a sampling of how much we've done. And there's another side to it. I can't even explain. Some of the ceremonies, just as we did that, very special, an incredible woman in this community. She loves to dance. And yes, I had to show you that picture because, that's why we do what we do. So I wanted to, I gave you a pictorial visual experience, and I want to stop with questions. I want to answer questions, thoughts, ideas. I could speak ad nauseum about this work, but I want to hear from you.
Rabbi, there's a few in the chat that I'm not sure if you were able to address yet, or if they were already part of the, one was about the plumbing. Did you touch on that?
I did not. So let's talk about plumbing. So the last, in a good way. So plumbing is not something that's part of the construction plan of the house. Homes, plumbing is external. So a lot of plumbing that happens in that area is done by the community wells. So the community wells are run to each home, and they're run to the area in each home, not in the home. So no one can have an actual running water in their house or running toilets. The schools have running toilets, but mostly don't, and not every community gets water every day. So we were in communities where we would only get water every other day. So that we have purified water that comes comes in the big jugs that you see in water coolers and things like that we use, and that we use for purified cooking. But the community water is not something that comes every day. So, but it does come, and when it does, the community fills up. And the reason it doesn't always come every day is because sometimes usually people pay a very small percentage, like 1% of what they have, in order to get community water. But the community water, sometimes the wells, the machinery goes, and it's very expensive to fix the machinery. So therefore, and then some communities have to go to neighboring communities to buy water or purchase water. So water is life or death in some of these communities. it makes San Diego look like we are water full, that we have no issues with water and there are no droughts. And some of these communities, again, you're not getting water sometimes every other day. So there is no internal plumbing, but electricity is put into the home. So the electricity is done after the home is completed, and then lines are drawn from externally from the power lines and brought into the home. So they do have electricity. There is just no water running inside. Yes, the adults. I mentioned this before, right? Emily, I said we do take adults all the time. Like I've done adults only trips also. I find that the mixed trips are really great because they bring a different kind of generational perspective, but I have done adults only. I've done 1 or 2 adult only groups and they've been wonderful. They're different because there's an energy that happens when the teens are there with the children in the community. Something happens differently when the teens are around because they almost are like built-in babysitters or built-in counselors, right? So they kind of animate the experience very differently than when adults only groups. Again, we've done it, but I prefer to do the mixed groups because they're very powerful. Do you mean Habitat for Humanity? This organization different than Habitat? So first of all, Habitat is a domestic organization. It's not an international organization. Habitat works domestically in the United States. Habitat is a mixed bag. I'm going to be very honest with you. It can be very effective in some communities and very bureaucratic in others, depending on the different locales, depending on, I tell you, my father-in-law lives on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts full-time. And he was the president of Habitat for Humanity on Martha's Vineyard, of which there actually is a very poor population, and they have a great need for housing. And the Habitat community there is incredibly challenging because of the bureaucracy of the townships that they have to work with. So it's not so much that the organization is problematic, it's the areas and the communities that they work in are so bureaucratic. You know what it takes to get anything in the city of San Diego, right? To just get a permit on something. So imagine when you're dealing with bringing in affordable housing or other into your community, what kind of challenge that sets up. Right. So it's not so much Habitat, but Habitat mostly is a domestic organization. They do a few international projects, but the NGO that we deal with is solely international. They're not doing that. There are other international organizations that I've worked with before, AJWS, American Jewish World Service, other organizations that do great work. Everyone has their different experiences. I just choose to work with Bridges because I know the people and I know the board, and then I was honored by them at one point, and it's hard to leave an organization once you're honored. You can't kind of walk away. So no, but they do, because I believe in their work. I really do. I know what they do on the ground. I've been there so many times. I see the transformation firsthand. So tell me questions, other thoughts that you had, please.
Jerome, I see you have your hand up.
You may have mentioned this, Rabbi, but from start to finish, on the houses that you were building, what's the time period?
1 week.
Wow.
1 week. Well, it's actually, if I had to really quantify the time, it's 4 days. So
Wow.
we get there on a weekend and we do a day of touring. We move into the community probably on Sunday afternoon, evening. We're working throughout the week, Monday to Friday. Sometimes we end usually on a Thursday afternoon, maybe sometimes Friday morning. It all depends. So the time period for the construction of the house also depends on if we're doing the foundation or if the foundation has already been done. It depends on the type of project, right? So like the school, we weren't going to finish. But in Nicaragua, we did 2 classrooms and we put 2 groups together, and we had 25 people working on these 2 classrooms. And we did the 2 classrooms in a week's time, in the same time frame.
So that one picture you showed us of the beautiful red floor, that's like day 4?
Day 4, wow. Correct. That's day 4.
Wow.
Remember, you have, in each home, you have 12 or 13 volunteers, and you have masons, 3 masons usually on each home, and either the assistant or the head mason on each home. So you have, and then if you have people like us who are versed in building at this point, you have people to move the project along faster. So, but there is a very rigid time frame, not rigid, but there's a very specific time frame of what you do when. It also is impacted by weather. Luckily, weather hasn't been such an issue. In the DR, it was a little bit of an issue because rain did come a little bit, but it doesn't really slow it down so much, but it may, if we were supposed to do a pour and it started raining, you can't really do the pour because you have to wait for it to curate. So that may push us to the next morning. So it depends. It's off and on. It's not 100%, but that's that can happen. Again, it depends on the project. Lori.
I think you kind of mentioned some numbers, but say you wanted to do something with our synagogue. Is there an ideal number like that you would say, yep, we can go, we've got the group of to be successful once you get there? What would ideally be the number that you're looking for?
I would look for about 20 for our first initial group. 20 gives us at least one community. So, and it makes the financial bearings of the group workable. So I'd say 20 would be my hope for an initial brigade, for an initial group.
McDonald's down there.
So when we go, we need 20.
When we go.
Right. Get your passports ready.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is not an if. This is when. This is when.
Exactly.
We're not doing this as an if. This is a when.
And so just to follow up, since we're going to have such an enormous response to the first trip, would there be a number that you would say, we've got to, we can't take more than X amount of people, or you figure it out?
That all depends on how big the question, it all depends on what's available at that time in the community. So if we know that they need 2 homes, then I know that's like 20 to 25 people. But I know if they could go above that, they never turn away a group. Like when our group was like between the church and the synagogue was, I think 78 was our largest number that we brought down. We had 4 different villages, 78 people, right? That's a massive amount just from the 2 congregations, a massive amount of people. We had 4 villages, so they were able to accommodate us. In the DR, where I think we would be going for, if we're going back with bridges, we would probably do, we'd probably start with 2 homes. So, but if we had more interest, we could make it work. Like that I'm not worried about. I'm more concerned about getting the initial group than worrying about how many people we have, so.
Well, we'll have a wait list, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's no question, but all of you get priority because you had the interest to show up tonight. So there you go. So I hope that answers that question. I think the question, there was another question on the chat of how do you select? How does the house select? So remember I said at the beginning that the community comes in working with the community, goes into a community about a year or 2 before any volunteer brigades come in. So they have someone that is the community liaison from the from Bridges to Community, and they work specifically to build a council, and the council is representatives from the community, and that council is the one that work along with Bridges to decide on how the homes are chosen. Bridges has a formula of how they do that, and it's somewhat objective and somewhat subjective. There are elements of it that are objective and subjective. How bad their current living conditions are, how many people they have in their family, what the demographic and the makeup of the family system is, what kind of work does the individual do or the family do? Are they able to pay the mortgage? Are they able to pay the mortgage? Because that is a big one. It's not to say that people haven't, defaulted or challenged or lost their job and can't pay it, that the house is already paid for. The money goes back into the community funds. So, but it is all those pieces are taken into account. It's not just one thing or decision or one person. It's a community decision, but the community understands that the committee is set up to make the recommendations to bridges to community, and the community's decision is the decision. So, and that is final. So there hasn't really been significant issue with that. I mean, they've run into a couple of bureaucratic issues a little bit here and there, but nothing that has been earth-shattering and nothing that has delayed any movement on beneficiaries' homes, for sure. Other questions? Yeah, Irene.
Were there any problems with gangs, like from this area that's where you have a lot of immigrants coming, and they're saying that they've been attacked or intimidated by gangs?
Yep. So in the communities that we worked in are relatively safe. In fact, the immigrants that we see on the news or that you understand are not coming from Nicaragua. They come from Honduras, Guatemala. They're coming from the surrounding countries, but not many of them are coming from Nicaragua. There are a few, but not many. Nicaragua is actually, even though it's the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere behind Haiti, it is actually a very safe country. A couple of years ago, there were, Daniel Ortega and his wife, who really runs the country, they ran on a socialist platform, but they've been more like, it's been more of a autocracy than it's been a democracy. And so Bridges pulled out when there was it wasn't a civil war, but there was civil unrest, and they ceased their programs because there began to be some unrest. Things have quieted down a lot now, and it's not like that anymore. But we've never encountered any danger. First of all, we don't leave the communities at night. So the communities are rural and they're relatively safe. We've never had an issue, and we always have security with us, and also watching when we go to the work sites and we leave, we have our stuff in our rooms, right? So the rooms are locked, and also we have guards that are watching all the time. But I've done, I think 18 trips I've done already. I can tell you, I've never had an issue, ever. I've had one child one teen say they lost a camera and they thought it was stolen. We mentioned it to one community member. The community went berserk, and it happened to be a child from the community who wanted to show his parents the picture that was taken on the digital image and was going to bring the phone right back. Literally, he was about 6 or 7 years old. And that was, in all my years doing this, that was the only issue. And the community went crazy because they couldn't believe that anything would ever be taken from anybody, right? Especially from people who come in to support their community. And there's a big difference. I'm going to answer your question, Emily, in a second. There's a big difference between how we enter into a community. If you're familiar with Spanish, there's the word for help in Spanish is ayudar, to help. And we never use that word because help is like a handout. And we use the word apoyar, which means to support. So when we go in and work with the community, we support the community. We're there to work alongside them. We're not there to give any handouts. That is not what we're there for. We're there to lend a hand. We're there to support and create these cross-cultural experiences. So Emily asked, when do I envision the first Beth Israel trip? It's a great, great, great question. I can tell you that no trips are running in 2021. Right now, we know that. And I am in touch with them, and we still don't have an okay because Central America is not really clear right now from COVID. So they're still working on getting it under wraps. I would envision, my hope is within a year and a half to 2 years-ish. That would be our first trip. That would be my hope. I think I'd want to start, even like Emily mentioned, a little more hyper-locally, and we can look at what's going on right across the border, perhaps, and see some of the organizations that are there to at least get our feet wet before we start flying, into Central America, but I'm very excited about the possibility. Well, we're not in Central, we don't go to South America, but we go to Central America. Africa is very far, and it's even farther from California than it is where I used to come from. So we're also concerned about distance. So, and Africa gets very expensive, and I don't have great experience. I've never been in an African region before. So I can't tell you, aside from Egypt and Northern Africa, but I can't tell you, there are many organizations that work in Africa. My concern is cost and effectiveness. And I know the communities that we work in. I know the NGOs that go down to Central America. They are reputable. They know what they're doing. I know the communities that we go into. I know what they're about. I know what they value, and I value those. So it doesn't mean can't venture there down the road, but if we're going to start off, I'd like to be somewhere where I'm familiar and where I know the players and where we know what they do is good, because especially when we're doing it in an inaugural sense for our Beth Israel congregation, I want to make sure it's the very best possible work. Bridges to Community doesn't work in any of the countries right now. They've moved there. So they work in the Dominican Republic and in Nicaragua. In Nicaragua, because of the civil unrest, they do not employ anymore. They do not employ any other organization. They're not employing brigades or any other people into the community right now. They've ceased their volunteer operations in Nicaragua. They are continuing to provide scholarships and other projects to local Nika participants that are living in Nicaragua. Like, they've provided scholarships for school, for law school, for business, and we see the stories of the recipients. They're amazing. So they are wedded into these individual lives of family members, and it's really beautiful. So they are doing that. I know our time is coming to a close, but I want to just get a last question or two. Okay, so yes, Bridges to Community again. Bridges to Community had a very robust staff. When the pandemic hit, their operations got cut. And so they have an in-country director that they're still employing, but right now all of their operations are run by volunteers. So they used to have a staff of, I would say, 25 individuals in country. And then they had many part-time individuals. And now they have one full-time individual that's handling the country work in Nicaragua and Dominican Republic, and have a few contract people. And most of the board is taken over in the interim until they're able to resume operations again, and then they will rebuild their staff. But that will happen when they start bringing volunteer groups back. But they had to make the call because it devastated their work. Like, it devastated. And in order to even keep the work that we're doing going, there had to be a lot of fundraising that went along with it, because they rely on the volunteer brigades to get them down there because of all the projects they do. So, okay. So did I answer everything? Did I inspire some excitement or activism in you? So again, you have any questions, I invite you to really come to me or ask questions. And of course, I'll be working along with Sari and Social Action Committee and the board and the other staff at the synagogue when we're ready to even start launching this. I can promise you we'll be going to Israel before we will be going to Latin America. That I can promise you, because Israel, we know, is opening. We're doing our first trip in December for our 11th and 12th graders for our Plaid trip. That's happening. We have tickets. We're going. It's happening. We're excited. So we're making that move. And we'll probably be doing some kind of adult or family experience also within the next year and a half to Israel. I'm still working on dates and possibilities around that. But we will be getting to Latin America, 100% for sure. So just when will be the question mark. So if you want to get more involved or excited, I welcome you to do that. And if you can't physically go, but you still want to be involved, there are many other ways to be involved from this side rather than you having to travel. So don't feel like if you don't want to be, if you can't be involved in the travel element of it, but you still want to be involved, many ways to do that. All right. Well, thank you all. I hope this was good for you. And again, any questions that you have, so happy to take you along that journey. It's really a beautiful, wonderful, amazing passion of mine, and I can't speak highly enough about it. So I'm glad. Thank you for allowing me to share it with you and the excitement about